Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this live event. This is a Year 11 assembly for pupils and parents to try and provide as much information as possible about what's happening with schools, both in terms of schools being closed and the news we've had about changes to exams and things at the end of the school year. I'm going to talk through a lot of information. I'm going to try and explain things as carefully as possible. Towards the end event, there'll be an opportunity for you to type questions into the chat, and I will try and publish and answer as many of those questions as possible. I'm going to share a PowerPoint slide with you in a second, and I'm going to talk through that probably for around 10 or 15 minutes. And then, as I said, at the end of that, there'll be an opportunity for anybody who wants to type in some questions, and I will try and answer that for everybody live at the end of this session. What I can see on my screen, people joining the meeting and the number of attendees steadily increasing. So I'm just delaying ever so slightly just to allow that number to tick up, because I know people have been very busy today and I want to make sure that the number gets as high as possible. What I will do while we're waiting, though, is I will get ready to share with you the PowerPoint that I'm going to talk through. That will appear on your screen in just a few seconds time. Let me make that ready for you now. So what you can see on the screen is the agenda for this session. I'm going to try and answer all 8 of these questions. I have a slide about each of them with more information on it. And as I said, at the very end, after I've talked about all 8 of these things, I'll then be ready and I'll try and answer as many of your questions as possible. So let's make a start. What do we know about school closures so far? So what we know so far is that schools will be closed until at least February half term. So that is 6 weeks, including this week, of remote learning. It's possible, based on other announcements that have been made this week, that schools might be closed for longer. We don't know, but what we do know is we've definitely got 6 weeks now where you won't be learning at school and you'll need to be learning at home. Schools, including St Albans, will be open for the children of key workers and for vulnerable pupils. And if you're a parent and you would like your child to be learning in school, or you're a child and you would like to be learning in school, then you can get in touch with us and ask about that. We can't guarantee it. We can't promise that there's space for every single person, but we will try and have as many children in school as possible if they meet that criteria and it's safe. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to show you some contact details that you can use to get in touch with us to ask about your child or yourself coming into school. Finally, we know that we need to be providing free school meal vouchers to families that will help you, if you're entitled to free school meals, shop in local supermarkets. More information about those vouchers is coming from the government, from the Department for Education this week, and I hope that before the weekend we'll be able to give you all of the information you need, and we'll be able to have those vouchers with you by Monday at the latest. What do we know about exams so far? Well, this is changing all of the time. So Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary today in the House of Parliament, talked about exams, and I've got a screenshot there from the BBC website about what he said. We'll talk about what he said in a minute, but there's some things that I think are really important. First of all, whatever happens with exams, your hard work that you've done so far this year will be recognised. It will be reflected in whatever the process is. And I'll talk through what I think those processes might look like in a minute. Similarly, the work that you do in the rest of the year will also be recognised, will also be taken into account. It will feel strange and unusual not doing exams as a Year 11 pupil, not doing your GCSEs. It's sad, it's like a rite of passage, it's a thing that you go through. And I'm really sorry that that's not going to be possible for you. But in 5, 10, 15 years, no one's going to know, no one's going to care whether your results came through exams or through a different system. It's not going to affect your life chances, the opportunities that you get. It doesn't matter about what system there is. You're still going to get GCSE results. You're still going to get GCSE certificates, and they will be just as valuable in later life. We know that certainly in school, we're going to work incredibly hard to make sure whatever the process is for getting results, it's going to be as fair as possible. You'll remember last summer for last year's year 11, there was lots in the news, there was lots of controversy about the results, and they changed what was going to happen to make it a much fairer process. And by fair, we mean that's going to reflect what we think pupils will genuinely be able to achieve. Whether that's through some exams or not is a different question. What we know finally is that normal examinations will not take place. Now, I know on the news, on social media, there's lots of language about exams being cancelled. We've got to be really careful, okay? No, it's not. We know for certain that normal GCSE exams won't happen. That doesn't mean that other types of exams won't happen. I still think it's possible there'll be some sort of exams used to help make a judgment about the grades that children are given this year. But we don't know. The two things we definitely do know, though, is we've got to be prepared for anything. Exams or not exams, we've got to be ready for whatever comes our way. And two, what's really interesting from what the Education Secretary said today is this last part over here where he said, we're going to put our trust in teachers rather than algorithms. And what he's saying is, in essence, whatever process, whether there's some more assessments involved or not, teachers and schools are going to decide the grades that pupils are given at the end of the year. And it's really important. That's a huge responsibility for the teachers in the school. It's a huge responsibility for the school itself. And it's a huge responsibility for me, because I'm going to be the person at the end of the day, at the end of the year, making sure that those results are fair and that they reflect the work that you've done and your work in the school. So that's what we know so far about exams. What should we be prioritising right now? What should be on top of our mind? Three things. One, we've all got to keep mentally healthy. It's a really stressful time. It's a really confusing time. It's a really unusual time. We've got to keep mentally healthy. We've got to have a balanced routine. We can't sleep too much or sleep too little. We've got to have a routine that we're used to. And if we're struggling, if we're finding things hard, we've got to ask for help. Crucially, at some point, this lockdown's going to end. It might be in 6 weeks. It might be in a few months. It's going to end. At which point, we're all going to have to be back in a routine of getting up and going to school and getting on with our lives. If we get into bad habits now about sleeping in too late, staying up too late, it's going to be really hard to change that in 6 weeks' time. We've got to get into good habits right now and stick with them. The holidays are finished. It's now work time. We're just working in a different place. Completing remote learning. So you've had a good start at that today, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but you're going to be set a lot of work, really detailed work that you're going to have to take very seriously in order to do well on it. And you've got to be up every day getting on with that work. And finally, as normal, as you would be anyway in year 11 right now, you've got to be planning really carefully for next year. You've got to be thinking really carefully about what do you want to study and where do you want to study it. And you've got to do that with your grades in mind. Lots and lots and lots of you started sixth form and college applications before the Christmas holidays. I really hope that lots and lots and lots, if not everybody, will want to be staying to study at St Albans Academy next year in the sixth form here. You have had an opportunity to start applications. It's really important, whether you're planning to stay here, whether you're planning to go somewhere else, that you've applied, that you've got a backup plan, maybe a second application that you've done, and that you really know what your options are for next year. It's really important you're organised about that. And if you know that you haven't applied yet, or your son or daughter hasn't applied yet, or you're not quite sure what's going on, that's got to be on your to-do list this week to start getting organised about applications for next year. So let's talk about remote learning. You need to be up and ready to go by 8:30 every morning. By 8:30 in your inbox from your school email, you'll have an email from Miss Maudsley with the instructions for the day, with the reminders about what's going to happen that day. You'll have assignments and quizzes to complete. The deadline for those is always the same, so it's not confusing. It's always 2 o'clock. From Monday, you will have live lessons to take part in. Lessons that your teachers will teach you through Microsoft Teams, a bit like how I'm talking to you now. And you'll need to take part in those. There'll be probably 2 of those every day, at least, starting from Monday. And on Monday morning, when Miss Maudsley emails you at 8:30, she'll be sending you the timetable for those lessons. Your teachers are going to be desperately trying to keep in touch with you to support you in your learning. And they're going to be calling you, they're going to be emailing you. You need to be professional and organised and on top of that and keeping in touch. Crucially, you need to keep your exercise books neat, tidy, organised and safe. We're going to need to be making judgments and decisions about what grades you should be getting for your GCSE qualifications. You're going to want to be able to show your teachers, me, other leaders in the school, the standard of your work. And the evidence that you do have, where you might not have exams, the two parts of evidence you're going to have for the quality of your GCSE learning is going to be how well you do the remote learning, but also the quality of your exercise books and so forth. So how will live lessons work? They'll start next Monday. You'll get calendar invites. You'll get separate invitations to those live lessons. And there'll be a link in those invitations that you can click on and join at the time the lesson is due to start. You'll get the schedule, like I said, on Monday morning every week. And when you go into those sessions, the norm will be that you start with your camera and your microphone turned off. And when your teacher is ready, your teacher will ask you to turn them on. Your attendance and your learning is going to be monitored very, very closely. Firstly, it's going to be monitored closely because we need to know that you're safe. If we see that you're not doing any of your work, we see that you're not taking part in the live lessons, then we're not going to know where you are and we're not going to know what you're doing. And then suddenly we're going to get very worried. We're going to be coming round, we're going to be knocking on your door of your house to find out what's going on. So for one reason we'll be tracking your attendance and your learning is to make sure you're safe. Your teachers are also going to be looking really carefully at your quiz scores and at the assignments you hand in, because that's going to tell us how to teach you better, what to plan for the next lessons. And crucially, to come back to this point about your grades at the end of the year, the school, your teachers and I are going to need evidence of your progress. The topics you're learning in maths, the topics you're learning in English, the topics you're learning in science, we need to see you making progress in those subjects every day and making really good progress so that we know how to fairly award grades for your qualifications at the end of the year. The work that you're doing right now through remote learning will decide those grades. It's crucially important that you're getting it right. At the end of every day, your parents will get a phone call to give them an update about any absences from live lessons or any work that you've missed. And at the end of the week, we're still working on this, but we hope we're going to be able to send parents a digital report card which summarises your effort and your work rate from the week. We hope to be able to send that out on a Friday afternoon to all parents. This is our tracker. So this tells us, it shows you how detailed and how carefully we're looking at your work, with all the greens showing us, yes, that person's handed in work for each subject. Yellow, they've made a start, they've not finished it. Red, it's not done. And we're tracking everything incredibly carefully because we know we have this huge responsibility as a school to make sure that grades are awarded fairly at the end of the year. In terms of online learning, if you're having any technical problems, you must let the school know straight away. If you don't have internet access, we can help you solve that problem. If there's a problem with your laptop, we can help you solve that problem, but we can't solve that problem unless we know about it. So you must tell us straight away, and in a moment I'll show you how you can get in touch with us. Also, when you're working online, both in live lessons, but generally, you must follow the code of conduct, which I'll share with you now. These are the things that we're expecting of you. You need to keep your username and your password safe. It is your responsibility what happens with your account. If something happens from your account, some unkind messages are shared, for example, you are not going to be able to tell us, oh, it's not my fault, I was hacked, somebody got my password. No, you are responsible for keeping your password safe. If you need to change your password to make sure that it's safe. But you are going to be responsible for what happens from your online account. So make sure your password is safe. You need to engage politely and respectfully with staff and pupils at all times, both in live lessons, but also in any email correspondence, any messaging. You're going to practice the professional habits that you're going to need as you get older and start thinking about college, sixth form, university, and the workplace. We're asking you to use Microsoft Teams and your school email account professionally and focused on learning. It's about learning, it's about your education, it's about your grades. If you want to have a chat with your friends, if you want to have some social discussion, that's great, that's fine. I really want you to keep in touch with your friends, but Microsoft Teams and your school email account is not the place for it. Create your own separate email account, use social media for those conversations. Microsoft Teams and your school email account is a professional forum, and we're going to have very high expectations around how you behave on that. We don't want to be calling your families, coming to your house, knocking on your door to complain about your online behavior. Start thinking of yourselves as young adults in sixth form, in college, at university, in the workplace, and get things right. The live lessons are a huge undertaking for your teachers. They take a huge amount of time to organise. The technical skill around running them online is really challenging, and we spent lots of time learning and training how to do that. You must arrive on time to those lessons. It's incredibly disruptive to join a live lesson late because it will disrupt the flow of the entire lesson. You need to keep your camera off at all times and use the hand raising function and unmute yourself only when you have a question to ask or when your teacher asks you to. You must use your school account and your full name. Your teacher will have control over who comes into the live lesson. If they don't recognise your name and they don't see a school account, you will not be admitted to the session. When you're joining the live lessons, everybody in the workplace, all adults right now, are thinking really carefully about working remotely and working on Zoom and Microsoft Teams. You need to think really carefully about where you're joining from. It needs to be a quiet space without distractions. It needs to be a suitable location in your house. The background should be blurred, and there should be nothing that reveals any personal information about your personal circumstances in the background of the screenshot. Dress appropriately. You do not need to wear uniform. I know some schools are asking pupils to wear uniform. We're not asking you to wear uniform, but you must be dressed appropriately. Okay. Only English communication. Again, Microsoft Teams, your school email account is for professional education purposes. Social discussions can be held through other forums. And we've talked about posting appropriately in the chat. The final thing to let you know is that all the live lessons will be recorded for safeguarding purposes. They won't be shared with anybody else, but we'll have a recording of them so myself and other leaders in the school can see what's going on. I said before about planning for next year and thinking about post-16 destinations and where you want to be next September, hopefully at the end of this pandemic. Here's the 3 things I think you need to be doing. 1, if you haven't finished applying, you need to finish applying, and that's right now, this week, both for St Albans Sixth Form and other colleges in the area. They'll be making decisions this week, next week, about who to make offers to. Also, have a backup plan. If you're not completely confident of getting the grades you need for one of your choices, you need to have a backup plan as to what you will do instead. You need to think about both your current grades, the grades we shared with you after your mock exams before Christmas, but also your teachers have come up with predicted grades. We will share those predicted grades with you next week. Those predicted grades are not going to be necessarily indicative of the grades we're going to give you at the end of the year. You shouldn't look at those predicted grades and think, great, they're going to be the grades that I get at the end of this course. That's not their purpose. Those predicted grades are there to support you in thinking about what you're applying to do next year and where you're applying to do it. Those will come to you next week. Crucially, if you as a pupil or as a parent are worried about what you're going to do next year and where you're going to study or what you're going to study, you don't know where to start, you must ask for help. And I'll share some contact details with you in a moment, but every day you're getting an email from Miss Maudsley, you can reply to her and say, Miss, I'm worried about what I'm going to be doing next year, and we will make sure that you get the help that you need. Finally then, in terms of getting in touch, if you want to know any more about remote learning and how it works, we've created a whole page on the school website called Remote Learning. If you go on the school website, you look across the top of the page, look at that red arrow there, it says Remote Learning. If you click there, it takes you to a place where lots and lots of information and guidance can be found, including videos that you can watch, which tell you about how to use Microsoft Teams well. Any technical issues, your laptop's not working, you're struggling with internet access, you've forgotten your password, these sorts of things, you can email info@arksandalbans.org. And if you have any other questions, if you're a parent and you're not sure about online learning, you're not sure about how things work, you can definitely ask questions by emailing info@arksandalbans.org. If you're completely stuck and you can't get onto email, then please call the school. There are staff here every day. We will answer the phone and we will try and solve your problem. Finally, if you want to speak to me directly as the principal of the school, you can email Miss Hooper, my PA, at jane.hooper@arksandalbans.org, and I will get back to you directly as soon as possible. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint slides now, and I'm going to try and answer some of your questions. In terms of answering your questions, let me just get that right. What should appear now on your screen is a text box on the right hand side. What you can do in that text box is you can type in any questions that you have, and they will pop up on the screen for me and others to see, and then I will try and answer them as best I can. I'm going to give you a few seconds to type in any questions that you have. We've got about 8 minutes left of this session in total, so if there's too many questions, I might not be able to answer them all, because I need to speak as well as I have to you, to the year 13 pupils and parents as well in just a moment. So I'll give it a minute or so to see if any questions appear, and then we will go from there. So we have one question. I'm going to publish that to share it with you. So the question says, trying to understand the components of teacher assessment. Is it a combination of coursework, lesson work, and mock exam results? It's a good question, which we have to be honest about and say we don't know. What was announced today was very vague from the government. It was very open-ended. It talked about teacher assessments. It didn't tell us any more. What I can tell you is what I think might happen. I think teachers will be asked to award grades. The school will work on those grades together rather than just one person coming up with them. It will be a collective decision. What we don't know is what guidance we'll get from the government on what those grades should be based on. The government might tell us to take into account mock exam results. The government might tell us that when schools open, pupils should do some short, smaller assessments, perhaps in English and maths. The government might tell us to base it on the work children have done during remote learning. We don't know. What I would say to parents, what I would say to pupils is, all you can do for now is to make sure you're confident that the school sees your learning in its very best light, doing every piece of work you are given to its highest standard. That's going to give you the greatest opportunity to get the highest grades that you want. What I can commit to saying to you is, as soon as the government gives any actual clear information about the awarding of grades, I will do another session just like this, and I will talk you through step by step exactly how the school is going to go about it. I can't tell you now because we just don't have enough information. What we do know though is that it's going to be fair, and the way we make it fair is by making sure it reflects the work that children have done so far, but we're not even halfway through the year yet. We're a third of the way through the year. So it also has to reflect the work that children do from now on, and critically, that includes their remote learning work. A second question here, which I will put up, which is about recorded lessons. Will the lessons be posted on a SharePoint so students can revisit it for revision purposes? We're still working out how to do that, which might sound foolish. It should sound straightforward. Because we're not necessarily using SharePoint as a function, we're using Microsoft Teams. I have a worry that the file size might be too large. We will address it. There's obvious value in students having them to be able to refer back to. That's a good piece of feedback for us to go away and think about how we do that. So leave that with us. We'll give it some thought. Thank you for that question. It's really helpful. A couple of other questions here. So a question that's come through is around mock exam results and when we'll be able to get them, if they haven't got them already. What I'm committing to is next week, all parents will receive, and pupils will receive, an email that has both their mock exam results from before the holidays and the predicted grades that came from those mock exam results. So you'll get that definitely by the end of next week. I'd hope that you'd have that early next week. Another question here, will teacher assessment judgments be awarded, will parents, have an opportunity to discuss and dispute teacher assessment judgments? I think that's very unlikely. So last year, it was very clear that the process was a confidential one, that schools were not allowed to share the teacher judgments with families before they were issued, because it would open up concerns about kind of undue influence and teachers and leaders being put under unfair pressure. What there was, though, last year was a very rigorous process once results been published for families to appeal, request resits, request re-evaluations and so forth. I'm conscious of time. There's a couple of minutes left. I will try and answer a few more of these questions that have come through. One here about well-being, which I'm really conscious of trying to think about how we support children's kind of well-being while schools closed. It's obviously very, very difficult. I'm hoping the live lessons, having some interaction with their teachers and their peers, is a help. We're going to publish some resources on the website about how to kind of independently and proactively consider and look after each other's well-being during lockdown. But crucially, if you have a specific concern about your child's well-being or your own well-being, if you are the child, then please do get in touch and talk to us. Either get in touch with Ms. Maudsley directly or through STA Info and request a call back, because there are plenty of things we can do on a one-to-one basis to support pupils. A question about the digital report card that I mentioned before, asking what it will show. Partly because I haven't created it yet, I can't tell you. So as we start designing and developing it, we will share something out that is hopefully informative and as detailed as possible. It's a piece of work that I need to do over the next couple of weeks. Probably the questions are now all coming in very quickly, so I'm going to try and answer them as quickly as possible, but I do need to step off in a second. A question here about, I'll publish it so that you can see it, about if you don't get the grades, will you be accepted for sixth form? It's a case-by-case decision. We'll write to all families next week about sixth form applications, grades and predicted grades. Read that information when you get it, and then there'll be very clear processes included on that letter, which is if you're worried, if you're not sure about what it means for you, whereby you can get back in touch with us and you can ask. I'm going to pick one more question to read before we stop. I'm sorry I've not been able to answer them all. A question about, can the teacher provide supporting materials to go alongside the assignments to help children do well on them? Yes, completely. That will be there in Microsoft Teams. And if you're struggling with a piece of work, then you can email your teacher, for example, Or when your form tutor calls, and they'll call regularly, you can explain, I'm finding maths difficult because, and we'll try and get you some help. A parent's asked about just being very worried generally about college applications. Please do get in touch. I'd suggest getting in touch with Miss Maudsley, and she will help direct you. We're really keen to give as much advice and guidance around college applications as possible. So let's have one-to-one personal conversations about college applications, because that's where we're going to be most helpful. Some pupils have put into the questions here about, can they come to school to study? Like I said, we've got a small number of spaces available for children who fit certain criteria. If you as a parent or you as a pupil want to come into school to do your remote learning, that's possible. You just need to ask. And so what I'll do is I'll ask Miss Maudsley in her email to you all tomorrow morning at 8:30 to include the kind of contact details, who to contact about what, so that then you know how to get back in touch and make those requests. We're going to have to stop because I need to now speak to the year 13 families and have the same conversation with them, who will have many of the same worries as yourselves. If you are a parent that has a child in year 13 as well as year 11, I'm going to be saying largely the same thing, so don't feel you need to join both conversations. If I haven't been able to answer your question or you still have questions, info@stalbansacademy.org is the email for general queries wanting to get in touch with staff. If you want to speak to me directly, jane.hooper@arcs and she'll help us connect together. Thank you for joining this afternoon. I know it's a busy and stressful time. Hopefully this has been a helpful start. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.